The Dawson Estate's golden gates parted like curtains on opening night, and 300 cameras erupted in synchronized flashes. This wasn't just a wedding. It was the merger of the century, and every lens wanted the first clear shot of her. Lady Clarissa Beaumont, the heiress so disfigured by childhood tragedy that no photograph existed from the last decade. Elias Knight, steel-eyed billionaire, stood at the altar with the rehearsed indifference of a man signing contracts, not vows. The board had demanded legitimacy. He'd agreed to provide it. Nothing more. Then the veil lifted. The ballroom inhaled as one, sharp, stunned, disbelieving. She was radiant. Flawless bronze skin glowing beneath crystal light, eyes that held galaxies instead of scars. Elias felt something crack in his chest, something he'd calcified years ago. Hey, beautiful souls. Welcome to Life in Stories. I'm so glad you're here. If this is your first time, subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. It gets wild. Comment below and let me know where in the world you're watching from. All right, let's begin. The flash of 300 cameras created a strobe light galaxy across the Dawson Estate's marble steps. Journalists jostled for position behind velvet ropes, their whispers forming a venomous chorus that carried on the evening breeze. The beast of Beaumont. I heard the fire melted half her face. Poor bastard, marrying a monster for a merger. Inside the cathedral-like ballroom, beneath chandeliers dripping with 10,000 crystals, Elias Knight stood at the altar with the posture of a man facing execution. His tailored Tom Ford tuxedo fit like armor, midnight black against his pale skin, jawline sharp enough to cut glass. He'd negotiated billion-dollar deals with less tension coiling in his shoulders than he felt now. This wasn't a wedding. It was a transaction, a PR Band-Aid over the scandal that had nearly destroyed Knight Industries 3 months ago. The board had been clear: marry into European aristocracy or watch the stock price collapse. Legitimacy through matrimony, old money sanitizing new blood. He'd agreed because the alternative was unthinkable, not because he believed in love or fate or any of the romantic delusions that made weak men weaker. The orchestra swelled. Mahler's Symphony Number 5, Adagietto, appropriately melancholic. The ballroom doors opened. A collective intake of breath rippled through the crowd as the bridal carriage, an absurd white and gold contraption worthy of a fairy tale, rolled to a stop outside. The veiled figure that emerged moved with hesitant grace, each step measured as though she might flee at any moment. Elias's business partner Marcus leaned close and muttered, "Steel yourself, mate. Remember the end game." But Elias wasn't listening. His eyes tracked the approaching bride with the focus he usually reserved for hostile takeovers. The veil was cathedral-length French lace, completely opaque, revealing nothing. Her hands, gloved in white silk, trembled slightly as she reached the altar steps. Protocol demanded he lift the veil himself. The cameras formed a hungry semicircle, every lens focused on this singular moment, the reveal of the decade. Would she be as hideous as the rumors promised? Would the billionaire's face betray disgust, pity, regret? Elias reached for the veil's edge, his fingers steady despite the chaos of his thoughts. He lifted. The ballroom gasped, a sound like oxygen being sucked from the room. She was exquisite. Luminous brown skin that seemed to glow beneath the chandelier light, as though she'd been dipped in liquid bronze. High cheekbones. Full lips pressed together nervously. Eyes the color of warm honey, wide and uncertain and utterly, devastatingly real. Not a single scar. Not a trace of the tragedy the tabloids had mythologized for months. Elias felt something crack inside his chest. Something he'd calcified years ago when he'd learned that trust was a luxury only fools afforded. His carefully constructed indifference splintered. He smiled. It was involuntary, genuine, the first unguarded expression anyone had witnessed on his face in 5 years. Camera shutters exploded in a frenzy. Headlines were already writing themselves. Billionaire stunned by bride's beauty. "You're—" He caught himself, recalibrated. "You're not what I expected." Her voice emerged barely above a whisper, accent softly refined, but lacking the aristocratic edge he'd anticipated. "I'm sorry." "Don't be." The officiant cleared his throat, and the ceremony proceeded in a blur of Latin phrases and orchestral crescendos. Elias spoke his vows mechanically, but his mind was a riot of contradictions. Her skin tone didn't match the Beaumont lineage, generations of pale, blue-blooded Europeans staring out from oil paintings. But bloodlines were complicated. Perhaps a distant relation, a scandal hidden in the family tree. It didn't matter. What mattered was the way she flinched when he slipped the platinum band onto her finger, the way she looked at the crowd like a deer cornered by wolves, the way she seemed to carry an innocence he'd forgotten could exist in his world of leveraged buyouts and corporate espionage. When he kissed her, chaste, brief, appropriate for the cameras, her lips were soft and terrified. The limousine's privacy partition rose with a mechanical hum, sealing them into leather-upholstered silence. Outside, the paparazzi motorcycles gave chase, their headlights streaking past the tinted windows like comets. Elias loosened his bow tie, studying his new wife with the analytical precision that had built his empire. "You can relax now." The performance is over. She clutched her bouquet, white roses and baby's breath, like a shield. "Is it?" "The public part, yes." He poured 2 glasses of Dom Perignon from the built-in bar, offering her one. "You handled the ceremony well. Better than I anticipated, given the circumstances." Her hand trembled as she accepted the glass. "What circumstances?" He paused. "An arranged marriage between strangers." "I assumed you'd be as resentful as I was." "Were?" The word slipped out before she could stop it, and he watched color rise in her cheeks. He corrected, but the lie tasted foreign on his tongue. She took the smallest sip of champagne, her eyes darting to the partition, the doors, anywhere but his face. Everything about her radiated vulnerability, the opposite of every calculated society woman who'd ever pursued his wealth. No artifice, no strategic flirtation, just raw, unfiltered nervousness. It was intoxicating. "What should I call you?" he asked quietly. In private. "Charlotte." She caught herself, eyes widening in panic. "Clarissa, Lady Clarissa." His brow furrowed. "You were about to say something else." "No, the champagne. I'm not accustomed to drinking." He let it go, filing the slip away for later analysis. 3,000 miles away, in a penthouse suite overlooking the Monaco coastline, the real Lady Clarissa Beaumont reclined on a velvet chaise, watching the wedding coverage on a wall-mounted screen. Her actual face, unmarred, coldly beautiful, reflected the TV's glow. She raised a crystal flute toward the screen, where Charlotte stood frozen in the receiving line, surrounded by strangers and lies. "Enjoy it, Charlotte," Clarissa whispered, her smile sharp as broken glass. "You'll wish you never said yes." She took a long sip, savoring the vintage and the exquisite cruelty of her plan. The limousine pulled through the gates of the Knight estate. 40 acres of modernist architecture and manicured silence. As the car stopped, Elias turned to his bride, his expression unreadable in the darkness. "I thought this marriage would be a performance," he murmured, his voice low and dangerously honest. "Now, I'm not so sure which of us is pretending." Charlotte's breath caught, and in that moment neither of them moved. The driver opened the door, flooding the cabin with light, and the moment shattered. But the question remained, suspended between them like a blade. The Knight estate wasn't a home. It was a museum of wealth where Charlotte had become the newest exhibit. Every morning began the same way. Maria, the head housekeeper, would arrive at 7 with breakfast on bone china, eyes downcast, murmuring, "Good morning, Mrs. Knight," like a prayer to a deity she dared not look upon. The gardening staff would pause their work when Charlotte passed the windows, bowing slightly. The security team tracked her movements through cameras embedded in crown molding and abstract sculptures. She'd grown up invisible in the Beaumont household, a shadow moving through corridors, carrying linens and tea trays. Now she couldn't breathe without someone documenting it. By day 3, the panic attacks started. She'd lock herself in the master bathroom, all Carrara marble and gold fixtures, and grip the sink until her knuckles went pale, whispering her real name like an incantation. Charlotte Ward. Charlotte Ward, your Charlotte Ward, but the woman in the mirror wore a $15,000 nightgown and a wedding ring worth more than her mother's lifetime earnings. The woman in the mirror was Mrs. Elias Knight, and that fiction was suffocating the truth. The only respite came after midnight. That's when she'd hear it, the piano drifting up from somewhere in the mansion's lower floors. Melancholic and exquisite, each note carrying a loneliness so profound it made her chest ache. She'd traced the sound on her third night, descending the floating staircase in bare feet, following Chopin's Nocturne in C-sharp minor through hallways lined with contemporary art. The music room sat behind glass doors etched with geometric patterns. Inside, Elias played with his eyes closed, still wearing his dress shirt from that day's video conference, sleeves rolled to his elbows. The moonlight painted him in shades of silver and shadow. She stood watching until the final note dissolved into silence. He opened his eyes and saw her, no surprise in his expression, as though he'd known she was there all along. "Can't sleep?" His voice was softer than the daytime version, the corporate edge filed away. "The house is too quiet," she admitted, "and too loud at the same time." Something like understanding flickered across his face. "I had the same thought. 5 years ago, when I first bought this place." He gestured to the piano bench. "Do you play?" "No, but I like listening." He shifted, making space. After a moment's hesitation, she sat, maintaining a careful 6 inches between them. This close, she could smell his cologne, something woodsy and expensive, and see the exhaustion bruising the skin beneath his eyes. "My mother played," he said quietly, fingers ghosting over the keys without pressing down. "She died when I was 16. Cancer. My father sold her piano a month later to pay debts I didn't know he had." His jaw tightened. "I bought this one the day my first company went public, Steinway Model D, the same kind she used to play." Charlotte's throat constricted. "Do you think she'd be proud?" "I think she'd say I built an empire, but forgot to build a life." He laughed, bitter and self-aware. "She believed in love. Real love, not the transactional kind my father showed her. She used to say that wealth without connection was just expensive loneliness." The words hung between them, vulnerable and raw. "I once worked for someone," Charlotte heard herself say, the partial truth spilling out before she could stop it, "who believed beauty and power were the only currencies that mattered, that people were either useful or invisible." She met his gaze. She was miserable. All that wealth, all that influence, and she was the loneliest person I've ever known. Elias studied her with unsettling intensity, as though trying to read a language he'd never been taught. "You speak about servants like you know them, like you see them." Her pulse spiked. "Doesn't everyone?" "No." His hand moved to cover hers on the bench, the touch gentle but deliberate. "Most people in our world treat staff like furniture. You thanked the driver yesterday by name. You asked Maria about her daughter's graduation. That's just human decency." "It's extraordinary," he corrected, his thumb tracing a small circle on her wrist. "You're extraordinary." She should have pulled away, should have erected boundaries, maintained distance, remembered that every kindness was another brick in the wall of lies she'd have to demolish eventually. Instead, she let herself feel the warmth of his palm against hers. The following week unfolded like a fever dream. Morning tea on the terrace became their ritual. Earl Grey for him, chamomile for her, conversations that wandered from philosophy to terrible puns. He made her laugh with dry observations about board members and corporate vultures. She challenged his cynicism with questions he couldn't dismiss. "Why build an empire if you don't enjoy it?" she asked one morning. "Why does anyone build anything?" Proof of existence, legacy, fear of irrelevance. "That's the saddest answer I've ever heard." He'd smiled, that rare, genuine expression that transformed his entire face. "Then tell me a better one. Maybe to create something beautiful, something that matters." "You sound like my mother." "She sounds wise." One afternoon, while adjusting a diamond bracelet on her wrist, a gift from his publicist to maintain appearances, his fingers lingered a moment too long. Their eyes met, and Charlotte felt the world tilt. He was close enough to kiss, close enough that she could count his heartbeats in the pulse at his throat. She flinched, pulling back, and shame flooded his expression. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have—" "It's not you," she whispered, which was both truth and lie. But the chemistry between them had become undeniable, a living thing that charged every glance, every accidental touch, every silence. While Charlotte drowned in guilt and longing 3,000 miles away, Clarissa Beaumont watched her phone explode with notifications. New Mrs. Knight captivates European press with grace and humility. Lady Clarissa, the bride who broke the billionaire's ice. Knight Industries stock soars as investors praise authentic union. Every headline was a knife. Every photograph of Charlotte in designer gowns, smiling shyly at Elias's side, was gasoline on the fire of Clarissa's rage. She'd expected the charade to be temporary, an amusing diversion while she secured her inheritance remotely. She'd never imagined her maid would be good at playing aristocrat, would be beloved. Her publicist called with enthusiastic updates. "The wedding photos are everywhere. Your approval ratings in Britain have tripled." Clarissa ended the call and hurled her phone across the suite. Then she made another call, this one to a journalist known for trafficking in scandal. "I have a story," she purred, "about a bride who may not be who she claims." She didn't give details. Not yet. Just enough to plant seeds of doubt, to watch them germinate in tabloid soil. 2 nights later, a storm ravaged the estate. Thunder shook the windows. Rain lashed the glass walls like accusations. Charlotte woke at 2 a.m. to the sound of the piano. Discordant, angry, nothing like the elegant nocturnes she'd grown accustomed to. She found Elias in the music room, whiskey glass beside him, playing Rachmaninoff's Prelude in C-sharp minor like he was exorcising demons. His hair was disheveled, shirt half unbuttoned, and when he finally noticed her in the doorway, his eyes were glass bright. "You should be sleeping," he said, words slightly slurred. "So should you." He laughed darkly. "Sleep requires peace of mind. I seem to have misplaced mine." She crossed to him, every instinct screaming danger, and sat on the bench. "What happened?" "I thought I'd married a stranger," he said softly, staring at his hands on the keys. "A business arrangement. A beautiful inconvenience I could compartmentalize and ignore." He turned to face her, and the raw vulnerability in his expression stole her breath. "Now I dread losing her." Charlotte's heart shattered. "Elias, I don't know when it happened. Maybe when you laughed at my terrible joke about derivatives. Maybe when you asked Maria about her daughter. Maybe the moment I lifted your veil and saw—" He trailed off, reaching for her hand. I don't believe in fate, but I'm starting to believe in you. She was going to tell him. Right then, in that storm-lit moment, she was going to confess everything. The switch, Clarissa's plan, her real name, all of it. Then he lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles with devastating tenderness. The words died in her throat. "Stay," he whispered against her skin. "However this started, just stay." Thunder crashed. The lie between them grew teeth. In Monaco, Clarissa Beaumont stood before her floor-length mirror, fastening diamond earrings and smiling at her reflection. Her first-class ticket to London sat on the nightstand. Departure time, 6 a.m. "Time to reclaim what's mine," she whispered to the woman in the glass. The storm was only beginning. The Knight Foundation charity gala was supposed to be a coronation. 200 of Europe's wealthiest elites gathered beneath the vaulted glass ceiling of the Kensington Art Museum, champagne flowing like rivers of liquid gold, string quartets playing Vivaldi between marble columns. Charlotte had spent 3 hours being transformed by a team of stylists. Midnight blue Valentino gown, hair swept into an elegant chignon, diamonds at her throat that cost more than most people's homes. She looked like she belonged. That was the cruelest part. Elias stood beside her in the receiving line, his hand resting at the small of her back, a gesture that had become natural over the past 3 weeks. Protective, possessive, real. "You're trembling," he murmured, leaning close enough that his breath warmed her ear. "I'm fine." Liar. But he smiled when he said it, that private smile reserved only for her. Guilt twisted in her stomach like broken glass. Every day she didn't confess was another day she betrayed him. Tonight, after the gala, she'd promised herself. She'd tell him everything, consequences be damned. She never got the chance. The museum doors burst open with theatrical precision at exactly 8:47 p.m. Clarissa Beaumont entered like a avenging angel draped in crimson Dior, flanked by 2 lawyers and a personal photographer. Her actual face, porcelain pale, aristocratically beautiful, completely unscarred, turned every head in the room. The quartet's music faltered into discordant silence. "Good evening," Clarissa announced, her cut glass accent slicing through the stunned quiet. She walked directly toward the stage where Elias and Charlotte stood frozen. "I apologize for the dramatic entrance, but it seems there's been a rather significant misunderstanding that requires immediate correction." Elias's hand tightened on Charlotte's back. "What the hell is this?" Clarissa's smile was razor-sharp. "This, Mr. Knight, is the truth." She turned to address the crowd, cameras already swarming like vultures to carrion. "That woman standing beside my husband," she pointed at Charlotte with one perfectly manicured finger, "is not Lady Clarissa Beaumont. She's Charlotte Ward, my former maid." The ballroom erupted. Camera flashes exploded in a blinding strobe. Reporters surged forward, shouting questions. Charlotte felt the ground dissolve beneath her feet, felt Elias's hand drop from her back as though she'd burned him. "That's a lie," she whispered, but her voice was drowned in the chaos. Clarissa produced a leather portfolio, handing it to the nearest journalist. Birth certificates, employment records, photographs of Charlotte in uniform serving at Beaumont estate events, all dated and verified. Her voice dripped false sympathy. The poor dear was desperate. Her mother's debts, her own poverty. I pitied her. I never imagined she'd exploit that kindness by impersonating me. "You forced me?" Charlotte started, but Clarissa's lawyer stepped forward. "Miss Ward was paid £10,000 initially as what she claims was a 1-week arrangement. However, when she realized the opportunities available as Mrs. Knight, she refused to relinquish the position." The crowd's murmurs turned vicious. Gold digger, fraud, criminal. Elias stood utterly still, his face drained of color, eyes locked on Charlotte with an expression that shattered her more completely than any words could. "Tell them," Charlotte pleaded, turning to him. "Tell them about us." The conversations, the piano. "Tell them I'm not— Are you Charlotte Ward?" His voice was arctic, each word precisely enunciated. The CEO armor locked firmly back in place. Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Yes, but—" "Did you impersonate Lady Clarissa Beaumont?" "She asked me to." It was supposed to be 1 week, just until— "Answer the question." His jaw clenched so hard she could see the muscle jumping. "Did you or did you not deceive me about your identity?" The truth lodged in her throat like a stone. "Yes." The admission rippled through the crowd like a shockwave. Elias turned away from her, and in that moment Charlotte understood what dying felt like. The private study in the museum's East Wing became an interrogation room. Security had cleared the space. Just Elias, Charlotte, Clarissa, and their respective lawyers. Through the door, they could hear the press frenzy, the scandal metastasizing in real time across every social media platform. Elias stood at the window, back rigid, staring at the London skyline. He hadn't looked at Charlotte since the ballroom. "Explain," he said quietly. "All of it. Now." Charlotte's voice shook as she recounted the truth. Clarissa's proposition, her mother's debts, the promise of 1 week and enough money to change her life. How she'd tried to maintain distance, but Elias had made that impossible. How every conversation, every laugh, every moment had been real, even if her name hadn't been. "I was going to tell you," she finished, wiping uselessly at tears that wouldn't stop. "Tonight. I swear I was going to—" "Tell me what?" Elias whirled on her, and the fury in his eyes was devastating. "That you've been playing me for a fool? That every word out of your mouth has been a calculated lie?" "Not everything. The feelings weren't—" "Feelings?" He laughed, bitter and broken. "You're good. I'll give you that. The shy act, the innocence, the way you looked at me like I was something other than a bank account." He stepped closer, and she could see the betrayal warring with something else in his expression, something that looked like anguish. "I told you about my mother. My fears. I let you see parts of me I've shown no one, and the entire time you were lying. Elias, please, don't." The word was a knife. "Don't say my name like it means something to you." Clarissa watched from the corner, satisfaction gleaming in her eyes. "If it helps, Mr. Knight, she fooled me too." I genuinely believed she'd return after the week ended. I had no idea she'd become so attached to the lifestyle. "That's not true." Charlotte turned on her. "You told me you'd expose me if I left. You said you'd ruin my mother, have me arrested for fraud. Do you have that in writing?" Clarissa's lawyer interjected smoothly. Charlotte's silence was answer enough. "I thought not," Clarissa sighed. "It's tragic, really. A desperate girl making desperate choices. The arrest happened at 11:43 p.m., broadcast live on 7 networks. Clarissa had falsified bank records showing wire transfers from Knight Industries accounts to Charlotte's name, evidence of embezzlement and fraud. The documents were expertly forged, complete with digital signatures and transaction histories. Charlotte was handcuffed in the museum's main lobby, cameras capturing every angle as officers read her rights. She searched the crowd for Elias, found him standing at the top of the marble staircase. Their eyes met across the distance, and she saw everything she'd lost reflected in his face. "I never wanted your money," she said, loud enough for him to hear over the chaos. "I only ever wanted—" The officer cut her off, guiding her toward the exit. Elias didn't move, didn't speak, just watched her disappear through the doors like a ghost he'd finally stopped believing in. The penthouse was silent except for the ambient hum of climate control and the distant wail of sirens 20 floors below. Elias sat in the dark, tumbler of whiskey untouched in his hand, watching news footage on mute. Every channel showed the same images: Charlotte's tearful face, the handcuffs, the perp walk. Then an earlier clip, one the tabloids had dug up from 2 weeks ago. Charlotte at a ribbon-cutting ceremony, speaking to a reporter who'd asked about the fraud allegations already beginning to circulate. "Mr. Knight is the most principled man I've ever known," she'd said, voice steady despite the hostile questions. "Whatever people say about our marriage, they should know he's built everything through integrity and vision. He deserves respect, not suspicion." She'd been defending him even as the walls closed in, even knowing she'd be destroyed. Elias's hand tightened on the glass. His phone buzzed. Marcus. "The board's called an emergency meeting. They want the marriage annulled immediately. PR suggests you appear with the real Lady Clarissa at next week's gala. Show a united front. Announce a new partnership. Salvage what we can." "Fine," Elias heard himself say. "You sure you're all right, mate?" "Number. I'm fine." He ended the call and poured the whiskey down the sink. On the television, the breaking news banner scrolled past. Billionaire and Heiress to announce new era at charity gala. In a holding cell in central London, Charlotte sat on a cement bench, still wearing the midnight blue Valentino gown, mascara streaked down her face. The guard had allowed her to keep her phone for 1 more hour before processing. She watched the same news coverage, saw Elias's name paired with Clarissa's, saw the future unfolding exactly as the real Lady Beaumont had planned. A new era of partnership, the anchor enthused. Charlotte's reflection stared back at her from the dark screen, a maid in a borrowed dress, playing a role she should never have accepted. The phone's battery died, the screen went black, and Charlotte finally let herself break. The Knight Industries' annual charity gala was a masterclass in damage control masquerading as philanthropy. Every power broker in Europe had received embossed invitations. Every camera angle had been choreographed, every soundbite pre-approved by legal and PR. The narrative was simple. Elias Knight, temporarily deceived by a cunning impostor, had reconciled with his true bride, Lady Clarissa Beaumont. Together, they would announce a historic merger. Knight Industries and Beaumont Holdings united in matrimony and commerce, redemption through optics, scandal erased by spectacle. Elias stood on the stage beside Clarissa, who looked resplendent in champagne-colored Ely Saab, diamonds dripping from her throat like frozen tears. She played her role flawlessly, demure smiles, delicate touches on his arm, the picture of aristocratic grace. He felt nothing. For 7 days he'd felt nothing. Not when the board applauded his pragmatic decision to proceed with the real Clarissa. Not when his lawyers drafted annulment papers citing fraud and misrepresentation. Not when he'd signed them without reading past Charlotte's name. He'd built his empire by excising weakness. Emotion was weakness. Trust was weakness. The sooner he cauterized this wound, the sooner he could return to the predictable machinery of mergers and markets. At least that's what he told himself at 3 a.m., alone in the penthouse, staring at the piano he hadn't touched since the night Charlotte had sat beside him in the storm. "Ready?" Clarissa whispered, her smile bright and false. Marcus approached with the merger contract, a leather portfolio containing documents that would legally bind Knight Industries to Beaumont Holdings for the next decade. Cameras positioned for optimal angles. The moderator adjusted his microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," the moderator announced, "we're honored to witness this historic moment. Mr. Knight, if you'd like to say a few words before the signing." Elias reached for the microphone, his prepared statement a blur of corporate platitudes in his mind. Then, every light in the ballroom died. The crowd gasped. Emergency exit signs cast the space in eerie red. Somewhere a woman screamed. Security shouted commands, flashlight beams cutting through the darkness like searchlights. 30 seconds of chaos. When the chandeliers blazed back to life, Charlotte Ward stood in the ballroom's entrance. She wore no gown, no diamonds, no pretense, just the simple black dress they'd given her upon release from custody, her hair pulled back, face bare of makeup. But she stood tall, chin lifted, flanked by Elias's head of security, David Chen, whose loyalty had apparently extended beyond his paycheck. The room erupted in whispers. Clarissa's perfectly composed expression fractured. "What is she doing here?" "Security, remove her immediately!" "She has evidence," David said calmly, his voice carrying across the ballroom. "Evidence Mr. Knight needs to see before he signs anything." Every camera swiveled toward Charlotte. She walked forward slowly, her footsteps echoing on marble, until she stood 10 feet from the stage. "Ask her," Charlotte said, her voice steady, despite the tremor in her hands. She pointed at Clarissa. "Ask her the password to the Knight Foundation's secure charitable fund, the one she claims to co-manage." Elias's eyes narrowed. "What are you—" "She's been posing as your partner for a week. Surely she has access to the accounts she's supposed to oversee." Charlotte's gaze never left Clarissa. "Or ask her about Project Nightingale, the hospital initiative in Ghana. Ask her anything about the work she's supposed to be intimately involved with." Clarissa laughed, brittle and sharp. "This is absurd. I'm not going to dignify." "Because you can't," Charlotte interrupted. "You've never accessed those accounts. You've never attended a single foundation meeting. You don't even know what Project Nightingale is." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Elias pulled out his phone, fingers moving across the screen with practiced efficiency. He pulled up the Foundation's secure portal, the one that required biometric verification and executive-level passwords. "The system logs every access attempt," he said slowly, realization dawning. "Every login, every view, every transaction." He looked at Clarissa. "You've never once logged in, have you?" Clarissa's composure cracked further. "I've been recovering abroad." "I had staff handle—" "No." Charlotte's voice cut through the excuse. "You had no intention of being involved. You wanted the title, the prestige, the merger, but you never cared about the work, about the people." She turned to Elias, and the raw honesty in her eyes was devastating. "Ask her about the email she sent to me 3 days ago. The one threatening to have my mother evicted if I didn't recant my statement to investigators." David stepped forward, handing a tablet to Elias. "Digital forensics recovered deleted correspondence from Lady Beaumont's private server. The blackmail, the forged bank transfers, all of it." The ballroom went silent. Elias scrolled through the evidence. Emails, transaction records, surveillance footage of Clarissa meeting with the journalist who'd first leaked the scandal, every piece of the puzzle clicking into place with sickening clarity. Clarissa lunged for the exit. Security intercepted her in 3 strides. "Let me go!" she shrieked, all aristocratic veneer evaporating. "Do you know who I am? My family will destroy all of you." "Your family," Elias said quietly, "filed for bankruptcy protection 2 months ago. That's why you needed this merger so desperately. Not for love, not even for business. For survival. The cameras captured everything. Clarissa's mask shattering. The security team escorting her out. The crowd's shocked whispers metastasizing into a roar." Charlotte stood motionless in the center of the chaos, and Elias realized he was moving toward her without conscious decision. He stopped 3 feet away, close enough to see the exhaustion bruising her eyes, the way her hands trembled despite her brave stance. "You came back," he said. "I couldn't let her destroy you." Charlotte's voice cracked. "Even if you hate me, even if I lose everything, you didn't deserve that." Slowly, deliberately, she pulled off the white cotton glove on her right hand, the one they'd given her with the dress. revealed the small crescent scar on her palm, barely visible unless you knew to look for it. The scar he'd kissed absent-mindedly one night when she'd cut herself on a teacup and he'd bandaged it without thinking. When he'd memorized every detail of her without realizing he was falling. "You asked me once if I was pretending," Charlotte whispered. "I lied about my name, Elias. But everything else was true. Every conversation, every laugh, every moment I fell in—" She stopped, tears spilling over. Everything else was true. Elias reached for her hand, tracing the scar with his thumb. The ballroom held its breath. "I know," he said softly. "I've known for 3 days. Since I watched the arrest footage for the 100th time and realized you were protecting me even then." His own eyes were wet now, years of carefully constructed armor crumbling. "You lied about your name, Charlotte. But I lied about something worse." "What?" "That I didn't love you." The words emerged raw, unpolished, real. "That I could sign papers and move on and pretend you were just another mistake." He cupped her face in both hands. "You were supposed to be a scandal. Instead, you became the first true thing in my life." Charlotte sobbed, and he pulled her against his chest, holding her like she was the only solid thing in a world built on shifting contracts and conditional loyalty. The cameras flashed. The crowd erupted in applause. Somewhere, his PR team was probably having a collective aneurysm. Elias didn't care. 5 days later. King's Cross Station, Platform 9, morning light filtering through the Victorian ironwork. Charlotte stood with a single suitcase, wearing jeans and her own clothes for the first time in weeks. Her mother's debts had been cleared, anonymously, though she suspected the source. The charges against her had been dropped. She was free. Free to disappear back into the life she understood, where she knew the rules and her place in the world's machinery. The train's departure was in 12 minutes. Then she heard it. The screech of tires, the slam of car doors, the commotion that followed Elias' night like gravity. He strode onto the platform alone. No security, no handlers, just a man in jeans and a white shirt, slightly out of breath, hair disheveled from running. He stopped when he saw her, and for a moment they just stared at each other across 20 feet of concrete. "You were leaving," he said finally, without saying goodbye. "You deserve someone from your world, Elias. Someone who knows how to navigate. You are my world." He closed the distance between them. "The galas, the mergers, the empire, none of it means anything if I'm alone in it." His voice dropped to something tender and desperate. "You were supposed to be my biggest scandal. Somehow you became my peace." Charlotte shook her head, tears streaming. "I don't fit in that life. I don't know how to be what you need." "You already are." He took her hands, the scar on her palm pressed against his heartbeat. "I don't need a society wife or a strategic partnership. I need the woman who sat beside me at the piano, who defended me when I didn't deserve it, who showed me what truth looks like." The train's whistle blew, 5-minute warning. "Stay," Elias whispered. "Not as Mrs. Knight, not as anyone but Charlotte Ward. Stay and teach me how to build something real." She looked up at him through tears, seeing the vulnerability he'd hidden behind boardrooms and balance sheets, seeing the man who'd played Chopin in the darkness and trusted her with his grief. "No more lies?" she asked. "No more lies? No more pretending? Just us. Whoever we choose to be." The whistle blew again. Charlotte dropped her suitcase. Elias kissed her as the train pulled away from the platform, steam and morning lights swirling around them. Cameras be damned, world be damned. Everything fading except the truth they'd finally claimed. The Daily Telegraph. Front page. The maid who saved a billionaire's empire, the untold love story behind the Knight Foundation scandal. In a shocking reversal, Charlotte Ward, initially arrested for fraud, has been vindicated and celebrated as the whistleblower who exposed a multi-million-pound scheme by Lady Clarissa Beaumont. Mr. Elias Knight has announced the establishment of the Charlotte Ward Scholarship Fund for service workers pursuing higher education. When asked about their relationship status, Knight simply smiled and said, "She's teaching me what real wealth means. Everything else is just numbers." He thought he was marrying an heiress for convenience. Instead, he met a woman who showed him what real wealth was: truth, loyalty, and love unbought. And for the first time in his carefully calculated life, Elias Knight stopped building empires and started building a home.
And there it is, the billionaire and the maid who rewrote their ending. If this grabbed your heart, subscribe so you never miss a story. Tell me in the comments, would you have forgiven him? Thank you for being here, for feeling every moment with me. More stories coming soon. Take care.